the guy who steals the Generations movie, Brent Spiner, and a bestseller with a very heavy fantasy life, author Robert Jordan, next on Sci-Fi Buzz. This week, we dive into the depths of Davy Jones' locker to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Walt Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Go shopping for some sci-fi stocking stuffers, buzz with Wheel of Time author Robert Jordan, and meet Brent Spiner, the shy actor who hides behind the face of Star Trek's Data.
Humor! I love it!
Hey, Allison, get a load of this. Hi, Mike Jarek here, the host of Sci-Fi Buzz. Sure, I have a big mouth. I'm kind of freaky looking, but I'm your host anyway. Hey, you may have seen me recently on the Sci-Fi Channel Star Trek Generations special, huh? Hosted that show? Oh, yes, I know. We've heard from all of you about your opinion about Star Trek Generations. Most of you said, you know, it wasn't a very good story. I kind of agree with that. Others said the TV show is better. One guy, hold on a second, one guy even called in and said, you know, this issue of Mad Magazine, Star Trek Generations issue, is better than the movie. But most of you just said, hey, P.U., movie stinks. Well, one thing you all said, you liked the performance of Data. Was pretty good, huh? Well, here's a Sci-Fi Buzz bonus for you. Brent Spiner, the actor who plays Data.
What? I believe this beverage has produced an emotional response. Really?
Brent Spiner found TV fame playing the pasty-faced android Data on Star Trek The Next Generation. But making the transition to the big screen in Star Trek Generations was the ultimate kick for this hard-working Hollywood actor.
The food was much better, and the accommodations were much better, but also we had more time to get it right, as opposed to just getting it, you know, and moving on because we got it, let's go, we have no time. On the picture, we actually had some room to play, and there was also the added benefit of being in a feature film, which was something I'd wanted to do since I was a child, so finally, here it was, I was getting the opportunity to be in a feature.
It should be noted, sir, that the collapse of the Viridian star would produce a shockwave similar to the one we observed at Amagosa,
destroying all the planets in this system.
Spiner is a notoriously shy guy who cherishes his privacy. So he's long tried to steer clear of the glaring spotlight that shines on each and every cast member in the vast Star Trek universe. But even without pancake makeup plastered on his face and a stiff wig on his head, Spiner found he was an easy mark for die-hard fans. So he finally began to bend toward the notion that if you can't beat them, join them. Do people on the street recognize you?
Some.
Yeah?
Yeah. More than I would have anticipated, certainly. I thought I had the best of both worlds. I thought I'm in this big high-profile job and I'm totally anonymous. What could be better? And I didn't prove to be that anonymous after all.
No, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, they catch it, you know, because when I first see you,
I know, I can have a baseball cap on and glasses, sunglasses, and nobody, you know, and still I get recognized.
Yeah.
And,
Are you getting more comfortable with the publicity and the recognition?
I'm just not that outgoing to begin with, and now suddenly to have to be responsive to lots of strangers is even more difficult, but I think I am getting better at it, and because at least I'm conscious of what I'm supposed to be sharing with somebody, you know. It's a bizarre thing. My mother, very quickly, years ago, at Rice Stadium in Houston, where I'm from, saw Joe DiMaggio, and she was thrilled, and she wanted his autograph from my brother and myself, and she said, can I have your autograph? And he said, well, do you have anything to write with? And she said, oh, no, I'll go get it. And so she ran to get it, and he was gone when she came back. Well, since that moment, in our house, anytime a Mr. Coffee commercial comes on, or you name it, you know, we hear this tale about Joe DiMaggio and what a, well, you know, rude human being he was, and I have to figure that's multiplied by everybody my mother knows. And so it occurs to me when I meet people that I really don't want to send them off with this story for their lifetime and for all their friends about what a jerk I am. But sometimes I've failed in that way, and there'll probably be people watching this who go, gosh, I ran into him, and he was really, you know, what a jerk. And occasionally I have friends who will keep me in line about it and say, you know, you could have been nicer to that person. And I think, you know, you're right. It's best, I think, to leave people feeling good about the contact.
Good. I feel good about my contact.
Good. Me too. Thanks.
Here's some Star Trek trivia for you, courtesy of Joe Strike at the SciFi Channel. Did you know that it was 30 years ago tomorrow, December 12th, 1964, that William Shatner walked onto a stage at the Desilu Studios in Hollywood, California, and started shooting Star Trek? 30 years ago. Boy, do I feel old. When we beam back, a salute to Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and hot-selling fantasy novelist Robert Jordan. With the holidays coming up, here is a pretty neat gift idea for your classic sci-fi lovers out there in the audience. The exclusive archive collection of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the film. And whether you remember the film or not, here's a quick, kind of neat look at what we think is Disney's best live-action film.
Jules Verne once said, "What one man can imagine, other men can do." And in his book, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Mr. Verne himself imagined some pretty weird and wonderful things. However, when we decided to make a picture out of this classic story, we soon discovered that though Mr. Verne was undoubtedly right, the imagining was much easier to do than the doing.
In what can only be called a daring move, the Walt Disney Company chose a sweeping 19th century science fiction saga for their initiation into live-action special effects cinema. Though probably the most respected animation studio in the world, most of Disney's creative team were ill-prepared to leap beyond a world where Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck ruled the roost. But that's not to say they weren't up for the challenge.
It's been an exciting experience here in Disneyland, where a wooden puppet called Pinocchio turns into a human. Peter Pan teaches children to fly. But my greatest thrill in this land of miracles was actually walking along the floor of the ocean with Captain Nemo and the crew of the Nautilus.
The Walt Disney Company's Laserdisc release of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea offers a behind-the-scenes peek at how this massive production was mounted. Included is an animated marine life segment that was created for the film but never used. Ultimately, some of the footage ended up on Disney's TV shows. And there are 2 Disney specials that focus on rigorous aspects of the production, from filming off the coast of the Bahamas to concocting a colossal squid.
We'll be fighting at close quarters with the most tenacious of all sea beasts. Stay clear of the tentacles. They'll seize anything within reach and hang on to the death. The only vital spot is directly between the eyes.
When 20,000 Leagues was released, the scene in which the giant squid attacks the Nautilus so impressed audiences, it helped garner a Special Effects Academy Award for the film. But before there was praise, there were problems. The biggest one was figuring out a way to conceal the squid's mechanics during a fight that was written to take place on a calm, flat sea at sunset. Finally, it was decided that instead the scene should occur at night during a storm, so that darkness, spray, and turbulent waves would obscure the monster's hardware. Though it added dearly to the film's already substantial $4 million budget, Walt Disney himself offered enthusiastic approval for the change. 2 decades after the film's release, Robert Matty, the man who designed the giant squid, was called upon to help a young director named Steven Spielberg build a shark for his first big picture, Jaws.
With every turn of the camera, a new precedent is established, a new record set. This particular scene, for example, is the longest, most elaborate ever attempted underwater. There are 42-minute work here on the ocean floor. 20 actor divers in front of the cameras, 22 technicians behind them.
The diving suits used on the film were designed just as Jules Verne had described them in his book. They weighed a hefty 225 pounds each. Self-contained twin tanks of compressed air allowed the actor divers to remain submerged for 2 hours. But for safety reasons, shooting never went beyond 55 minutes.
These dishes come entirely from my ocean kitchen. There is nothing here of the earth.
How remarkable.
This tastes like veal. The flavor deceives you. It is fillet of sea snake.
Disney made 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea 84 years after Verne's book was originally published in Paris. And 4 decades after first finding its way into American theaters, the movie still offers an assortment of cinematic treats. So despite Hollywood's recent achievements in cutting-edge techno tales, this film, like the book, can be regarded as a classic accomplishment that truly transcends the test of time.
Look, this is what I do. This is what I am. I write. I make stories.
Fantasy author Robert Jordan is one of the most popular storytellers today. His multi-volume books, The Wheel of Time, have created a phenomenon with over 2 million copies in print. Not only is Jordan one of the most read and talked about authors today, but he is also one of the hotter topics on the Internet Computer Network.
What do fans tell you they like so much about your writing?
It's a different thing for every person.
Really?
Yes.
What do the women like?
The women like the women. I was told by a number of women who came to signing several years ago that they were surprised to find out that I was a man. They thought no man could write women like that. Now, I like this because my editor used to say that I couldn't write women at all. I find this a very sweet revenge.
Jordan, a veteran of the Vietnam War, has definitely connected with his audience, both male and female. And he has some definite thoughts as to why fantasy literature is so popular.
2 things, really, I think. One, you can talk about good and evil, right and wrong, and nobody tells you that you're being judgmental. And the other thing is, in fantasy, there's always the belief that you can overcome whatever obstacles there are, that you can make tomorrow better. And not only that you can, but you will if you work at it.
Do you remember when you conceived the Wheel of Time series?
The first thought that came to me was, what would it be like, what would it really be like to be tapped on the shoulder and told you were born to be the savior of mankind? And I then very quickly thought, what would happen if the savior of mankind really showed up and he was really there to save the world from impending doom? What would the real response of the world be? And after 10 or 12 years of knocking around in my head, because I always give my books a long lead time, that turned into The Wheel of Time.
Jordan's books have been called a combination of Robin Hood and Stephen King. He manages to create characters that seem real, perhaps because he uses many of his own personal experiences in the telling of these epic stories.
Do you ever use your experiences in Vietnam in your stories?
Yes, indirectly. I know what it's like to have somebody trying to kill you. I know what it's like to try to kill somebody. And I know what it's like to actually kill somebody. These things, I think, help with writing about people being in danger, or especially if it's in danger of violence, which happens occasionally in my books.
Meanwhile, Jordan continues to work on the next volume of the Wheel of Time series with no idea when he'll finally wrap the whole thing up.
I know where I'm going.
You do?
I know where I'm going. I know the last scene of the last book. I could write it now. I could have written it before I started this series. I know how all of the major storylines are going to resolve. I just have to get there. And I'm not sure how many books it's going to take. There are going to be several more books. There are going to be some more books. There will be a few more books, but not too many.
No telling how many volumes of the Wheel of Time we'll eventually get, but with Robert Jordan as the author, you can bet we're in for some very interesting reading. Harlan Ellison remembers his good friend, horror writer Robert Bloch, next. Now, some of you have asked that our commentator Harlan Ellison give you the address of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. Get ready to copy. Here's Harlan.
My pal Bob Bloch died at 8:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Friday, September 23rd. This commentary goes in a couple of different places. Bear with me as I go there. When I got into L.A. in 1962, I was broke, dead flat broke. It's one of those Horatio Alger stories. I had literally 10 cents in my pocket, 10 cents. And I was getting divorced from a lady, and she had a son from a previous marriage, and we had driven out here, and I got here broke. And I wound up in a motel. And I was stuck in that motel for 2 weeks because I didn't have the money to get out. And I went and I asked Bob Block, whom I had known for many years. I'd known Bob since I was 14 years old. I went and I asked Bob Block if he could grub stake me a couple $100. It's 1962. $200 was a lot of money. Bob had just come out of a year-long Writers Guild strike and was pretty close to the edge, had no money, but I didn't know that. He gave me the $200. I was unable to pay him back for 5, 6 years. He never asked me for it once. Never. When I paid it back, it's almost as if he didn't remember it. Bob Block was a good friend of mine. He was a great, great writer. He's a man who finished the last unfinished Edgar Allan Poe story, The Lighthouse. Among the many things he wrote, yours truly, Jack the Ripper, and a wonderful biography, what he calls an unauthorized autobiography called Once Around the Block. And he died. He died without getting a Grand Master Award. And a lot of people say, well, he wrote fantasy, he wrote horror. He also wrote science fiction, folks. He wrote it from the age of 17 on, when he was discovered by H.P. Lovecraft and made part of that inner Lovecraft circle. He wrote a lot of science fiction. But he never got a Grand Master Award. You know where part of this commentary is going, because I've been talking about Science Fiction Writers of America and how they have been denying the Grand Master Award to at least 6 major writers who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s. Bob died without getting that award. The days grow short, and SFWA, Science Fiction Writers of America, which says you can only give out 6 Grand Master Awards in a decade, are letting the days go by, and they're talking and talking and talking, and the time is now well past for talking. Those of you who give a damn, please send letters to the president of SFFWA. Her name is Barbara Hambley, and say, we read this stuff. You can have all the little private organizations you want, but it's still our literature, and we really want these people to get the Grand Master Award before they die. We're not talking here about not giving it to them this week. We're talking about them ever. If they die, it's too late. Which brings me to the second point that I was going to. Before Bob died, he was a very proud man, and he and his wife Ellie did not want the knowledge that he was dying to get out. Bob wanted to release that information himself. He wrote an article, it's in the current issue of Omni, about facing death. But he didn't want people to know about it because he didn't want them to think that he was needful of money or needful of attention. He was very, very proud that way. Unfortunately, a man who publishes a semi-little newspaper, a little amateur rag called Science Fiction Chronicle, before Bob Block died, ran a piece, Bob Block, on his deathbed. And he went into detail about Bob's cancer. It was very unpleasant, and the man was pilloried for it. I'm not even mentioning his name because I don't want to give him that much publicity. And when Bob's daughter, from Bob's deathbed, called him and said, why did you do this? This is a terrible thing. He argued with her and said it was his right to do it because this was news. Now, other newspaper people who happen to be in the genre, people like Christine Catherine Rush, who edits magazine of fantasy and science fiction, she says, no, I've been a journalist all my life. She said it is the public's need to know of the death, not of the dying. There is a lot of this goes on. It is bad taste. Science fiction, the fans, they're forever writing great eulogies about writers after they're gone. They want to put on conventions in their honor. But they don't do it when they're alive. They don't honor them when they're alive. It's then they can all beat their breasts and talk about how wonderful this person was and do the eulogies that you see in fanzines. Endless stupid fanzine eulogies. But they don't do anything for them when they're alive. What they could do for them when they're alive is get them the Grand Master Award. The death of Bob Block brings this home to us very, very, very sharply now. The time for talk is past. I've done 4 of these, and SFWA has done nothing yet. Now is the time for those of you, writers and readers and fans and editors who give a damn, to do something. Put the pressure on, if for no one else, for the memory of Bob Block.
'Tis the season for some otherworldly gifts after this invigorating interval. To our holiday tree here at Sci-Fi Buzz, where do you think Pokey should go?
How about right there?
Right there? Okay, good job. Well, I'm going to put him in front so everybody can see Pokey. Where's Gumby? Well, we want to give you some holiday gift ideas right now with our Buzz Best Bets.
December is here, and we have a few ideas on how you can spread some holiday cheer on this week's Buzz Best Bets. The amazing science fiction and horror trivia game is the perfect gift for genre buffs. Three friends came up with the concept after holding impromptu trivia contests to help pass the time on their way home from work. The game consists of 3,200 questions in categories ranging from frontiers and galaxies to monsters and superheroes. And stocking stuffers for Star Trek fans abound at your local bookstore. Original series cast members Nichelle Nichols and George Takei have published tell-all autobiographies. One subject discussed in both books is the less-than-loving feelings the actors harbor for former castmate William Shatner. Meanwhile, Shatner has written a companion book to his top-selling memoir, Star Trek Memories, called Star Trek Movie Memories. Also out in bookstores are The Making of Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, an in-depth look behind the scenes of the syndicated TV series. Where No One Has Gone Before, a pictorial history of Star Trek, and Gene Roddenberry, The Last Conversation, Yvonne Fern's revealing dialogue with the creator of Star Trek. Happy shopping! Those are this week's Buzz Best Bets.
Okay, who packed these lights last year? Susan? Here, do work with that, will you? Gotta tell people about next week. Now, next week on Sci-Fi Buzz, Leonard Nimoy will be here, Dean Koontz will be here, also Model King Randy Bowen will be right here, and some great, fantastical holiday gifts that you might want for yourself. We'll see you again next week for Sci-Fi Buzz. Hey, Tinsel Boy, throw me some tinsel, will you? Thank you.
The mysteries of aliens, the magic of Houdini, the miracles of angels. Now the real stories. People and events are explained in Mysteries, Magic, and Miracles, hosted by Patrick McNee. Coming up next.